Hey audience, okay, so I wanted to share a video with you tonight on how I make tinctures. Now, last month I wish I would have had these beauties at my fingertips, but I did not. So I decided to whip up a batch and actually record it so I could share my tips, my tricks, little things that I have learned along the way with you. And my process is a little bit on the different side. I will be using Everclear to be making these tinctures. So I made a chamomile tincture, an echinacea tincture, and a calendula tincture. If you are interested in learning how to do these, then just keep watching. My daughter just started preschool, and I've already noticed that we're going to be exposed to every germ that school can possibly throw at us. So I'm going to make a few powerhouse tinctures to help us along and help us heal whenever we get hit with something. And I'm going straight into the Apothecary today, and I'm going to grab my chamomile, just here. Then we are going to come down here, and I want my, Echinacea. And then lastly, I want my calendula down here. Calendula is the first herb runner-up. Calendula is good for toothaches, fever, flu, stomach aches, increased urination, basically a diuretic, and to aid digestion. So beginning, you will need little glass jars, however big you want to actually make your dose of tincture. I'm using these little guys just to kind of show you how I do it. So your glass jar, your herb, and you want to fill the glass jar up about halfway. The way that these flowers are, really get in there and press those petals down. That way it's very compacted in there. Maybe just a little bit more in there, and there we are. So, halfway full in the jar. The next thing to talk about is the actual solvent that we're going to use to break down the herb and extract all the medicinal qualities that we want. Now, some herbs can actually be used in tinctures with wine or vinegar, or even like a vegetable kind of glycerin. You can make tinctures with those as well. But for me, and you can also use, most commonly what I see is everybody tends to use vodka, and it's fairly cheap, you know, okay, $20 a bottle. But most vodkas run at about 80 proof, so that means it's only 40% alcohol and 40% water in that bottle. So technically you're making that tincture with a little half and half alcohol, half water. Now what I have figured out in over time making my tinctures, become aware that certain herbs need higher levels of alcohol to be broken down. And I will give you an example. You can easily Google this and search for lists of solvent ranges for herbs when you're making tinctures. They are out there. So I'm going to share one that I have. Now, this guy right here. Let's take top of the line there. If I was going to work with alfalfa root, my solvent percentage would need to fall somewhere in between 40 to 50%. So if I had vodka and I wanted to make a tincture for alfalfa, that would work. However, the next one down, moving too much here. The next one down, Angelica Root, the solvent range needs to be 70 to 75%. So if I bust out my Angelica Root and I dump some vodka on it, it is not going to break it down as much as I need it to. It's not even going to get close because it needs 70%, 70 to 75% alcohol as a solvent. So this is why I'm sharing this little tidbit with you guys, you know, learning, live and learn kind of thing. So for me, my tinctures, I tend to go full throttle since I'm a nerd and I wanted to be able to pull off those ranges. I went straight to the hardcore source and I got Everclear. This stuff is basically highly flammable. 190 proof. Okay, we're talking hardcore stuff. It's not to be taken lightly, and it's actually illegal in some states. Living in Arizona, I can go and buy it. So that is what I choose to make my tinctures with. Now, I kind of eyeball it. This is more of a folk method, if you want to call it that. I'm not breaking out beakers and measuring cups to get everything precise. But I do kind of eyeball it. So my calendula, I believe the range for my solvent is 50 to 80%. So if I were to make a tincture with vodka, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to get all of the medicinal qualities out of there. It's not going to break it down enough. So for me, calendula, 50%, well, look, that's already 50% right there. If I wanted to push it to 60, I'll go a little bit more. 70, a little bit more. That would be my alcohol level that I would fill it up with the Everclear. The rest, I would top off with a little bit of water. Easy, right? So our calendula. Little funnel comes in handy. Alcohol. And pour it on in. It's better to go a little bit slower. Once it gets in there and all those little bubbles come out of the herbs, that's what we're looking for. So I'm gonna go with just a little bit more. Right about there. Yeah, that feels good. Cap the Everclear because I do not want to spill that stuff. Then I'm coming over here and topping the rest off with some water. Also, no tap water here. Distilled or spring. We don't want any kind of funky business entering our tinctures at all. So, you cap it, and there you go. You got your tincture. Oh, you know what? Here's a little tip too. The metal caps, see how this one's just straight metal like that? These ones are good to get a little piece of wax paper and cut a small square, put it over the top, then cap it. That way it doesn't rust, because this tincture is going to be in this bottle for about a good 2 weeks. My herbs and my Everclear and dashes of water off camera. I figured that would be a lot quicker for each of my herb choices. You did get to watch me do the calendula. However, I'm going to recap. So, calendula, up first, the alcohol solvent rate should be landing anywhere from 50 to 80%. Calendula is good for cramps, toothaches, fever, flu, stomach aches, increasing urination, basically a diuretic, and digestion. I'm going to give him a good shake. Next up is Echinacea. Echinacea is super powerhouse, I swear. Since my daughter is bringing home the flu bug, and it was a pretty savage one here that I had to deal with last month, I decided to do a tincture out of Echinacea. Now, the alcohol solvent range is anywhere from 45% to 75%. Do not go higher than that. If you go higher, you're basically breaking down the herb too much and killing all the medicinal properties. So Echinacea is well known for being a powerhouse antibiotic. Whatever is going on, it basically kicks its ass and ejects it from the party. It is also known as a souped up blood purifier. So yes, my Echinacea is there and brewing already. Lastly, the one that I chose to make a tincture out of this time is chamomile. Chamomile, the alcohol solvent range lands in between 45% to 65%. Chamomile is an excellent anti-inflammatory. It aids digestion, and I read that it helps with menstrual cramps. Now, I don't know about you, but I get a brutal round of menstrual cramps, once a month. So I am actually very curious to see if this will help me. So, alright guys, let's talk time and dosage. These are my other helpful tips on dealing with tinctures. Now, most of the time, these little beauties need to be put somewhere where you will see them every day because they need to be shaken up. A little bit of physical activity on this. Now, these need to basically break down and do their thing for about 2 weeks. What I would recommend, magically speaking, I would make your tinctures on the new moon so that they're building up all that medicinal goodness, that medical goodness, that healing goodness. They're building it up, and by the full moon, time to bottle them. Strain and bottle. So that basically your 2 weeks. If you want to push it to 3 weeks, you can. If you think that leaving the tincture in there and letting it break down longer and longer and longer is going to make it stronger, not really. You can only cook the chicken so far, if you catch my drift. You basically, it would be better to strain it, then take the remaining liquid, which is your tincture, and repeat the process. Add that remaining liquid to a new batch of herbs and repeat the process. That will be the best way to get a stronger dosage if you really want to mess around with that. Now, my other tip is actual dosage. How do I take these once I have them made? Now, in general, we're talking like maybe 2 dropperfuls every 2 to 3 hours for 1 or 2 days. And then if symptoms are persistent, you can do 2 dropperfuls 2 or 3 times per day for 5 days. Now, medical disclaimer, if you're pregnant, don't mess around with herbs. If you're breastfeeding, don't mess around with herbs. Obviously, this is common sense. If you have an acute medical condition, you should seek professional help. These are merely herbal supplements to add in your healing process. I would definitely recommend reading, whether you choose to do it on the book or online, and basically studying up about tinctures before you start dabbling with them. Also, you don't necessarily have to use these for medical reasons, as I am. These are very good to use for magical purposes as well. Basically, you can do just about everything with them that you can do with maybe an oil. You can anoint tools, you can anoint yourself. You know, obviously be careful if you're allergic to certain herbs. I would be very careful with messing with fire and tinctures because this is alcohol. It's flammable. Alright, on to part 2, the straining part. Now, my tinctures are over here doing their thing, but for recording purposes, I'm going to use this guy to show you the next step. After the 2 weeks is up, it is time to strain. So, what you will need, a glass or a bowl, a piece of cheesecloth or a very fine, thin meshed strainer will do as well, and probably like a rubber band to hold it on there. So, make it a nice little pouch in there. Unscrew your tincture and dump it in.
go slow. That way, if the herbs kind of clog up the material, it's not going to overflow on you, because you really, really don't want to lose any of that precious liquid at all. Now, I'm fighting this a little bit in this jar, but with time, with 2 weeks, this stuff will be so basically chewed down, blended down, that it's going to fall right out of the jar for you. So you won't struggle with it at all. But for time's sake, I'm doing it the quick version. Now you have the flowers. This is the calendula. I'm just going to press it down a little bit. Get as much as that of the liquid out of them as I can. Then I'm going to carefully pop it up. Remove my little rubber band, and now I have this little pouch here. Now I'm going to give it a squeeze and get all of that liquid out as much as I can. What you are left with is your tincture. This is Calendula Tincture right there. Technically, it hasn't steeped for a good 2 weeks there and done the whole maceration process. However, look, it's already got the color to it. And that was barely 30 minutes just recording this video. So now you have your tincture. You can double strain it if you feel that you don't want no floaties in there. The next part is you're going to want to bottle it. I recommend these little bottles, the ones that will come with the actual dropper. That way your dosage methods are easy. Definitely recommend labeling them. You want to put what the herb is and when you made it. They do have a long shelf life, but it is good to know that, hey, that tincture is 3 years old. It might not be that great anymore. So definitely label them. Also, dosage wise, you know, how do I take it? Well, most of the time, tinctures are taken, they call it bilingually, basically under the tongue. That's a very old school method. So, you know, 10 droplets under the tongue, that kind of thing. However, there are easier ways of taking it, and they can be as simple as getting a glass of warm water and then adding the tincture to that and swallowing it. Or you can also add it to a tea or a beverage of your choice. Now, with the herbs and the alcohol, it has a tendency to be absorbed in the body very fast. That is why tinctures are still being made nowadays, despite the fact that modern medicine has jumped ahead by leaps and bounds. I recommend dumping the tincture into like a Pyrex glass or using a funnel to funnel it into your bottle and storing it. Another thing about the bottle that you choose to store it in, go with the colored bottles. It doesn't matter if it's blue or brown or even vintage purple. The colored glass will keep light from breaking down any of the nutrients and minerals, the medicinal properties that are floating around in there in that tincture. It helps preserve it, keep them in a cool, dark place, basically. Just how you would treat just about any other medicine that you have in your arsenal or your medicine cabinet. And that, my friends, is basically it.